Welcome to Barbells and Motherhood. I'm your host, Julianne Bali, owner of Motherhood Barbell. I'm a pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach, CrossFit Level 1, and mom of 3. On this podcast, we discuss all things pre- and postnatal exercise, bust common myths such as don't lift over 20 pounds, educate about core and pelvic health, and explore all facets of motherhood. If you're a pregnant or postpartum mom that likes to throw around barbells, want to learn more about your pelvic floor and core, and looking for real research-based exercise guidance in any season of motherhood, this podcast is for you. All right, thank you for joining me on the Barbells and Motherhood podcast. Today we have Ashton with us, who is one of my colleagues and friends from Instagram, but it feels like we're real friends even though it's just Instagram.
Yes, very much.
And she has agreed to join me today, and I am so excited to be able to have her on here to talk about some of her personal experiences in coaching and with her experiences with pregnancy and birth. And so, Ashton, just go ahead and briefly introduce yourself and what you do and who you are.
Well, my name is Ashton Koehlmoos. So thank you so much for having me on here. I'm really excited. I am Iowa based. So I live up in Northwest Iowa. I married my high school sweetheart. We live on his family. Yes, we live on his family acreage. And I have 3 boys. I have 2 boys that are here on earth with me, and I have 1 son that is up in heaven. And I know we're going to talk about that, but I come from a sport background. Like, I was an athlete my entire life. Softball and running track were my jams. I went to college at Dakota State University on a softball scholarship. And I knew from like 16 years old, like, I wanted to be in fitness. Like, I thought it was so cool. I wanted to help athletes be strong and all those things. So right away, I knew what I wanted to do with my life, and I never swayed during any of that. So I have a bachelor's degree in exercise science. And then I always said, like, I'm going to own my own gym someday, being like that sort of personality, just the athlete background. So I have a master's in sport facility management from the University of South Dakota. And then most of my career was spent down in Atlantic, Iowa at the Nishna Valley Family YMCA. I got to give them a shout out. Like, they really shaped who I am as a person and just my philosophy on training and how I see fitness. But I spent 7 years there, started as a part-time employee doing personal training, group exercise, and then moved my way into the full-time position where I left in 2019 as their fitness and youth sport director, is what I did there. After I had my son, we'll get into this, I'm sure, but I stepped away from the fitness space because my story involves infertility. And I really didn't know if he was going to be our only child or not. So I wanted to see him grow up. And I was definitely the person that said, like, I am never going to like stay at home with my kids. Like, I would be a bad mom if I did that. So really like a 180 switch in that aspect. And here I am. I felt a calling throughout my pregnancy, actually my postpartum experience with Oliver. And I just knew that I had to spread this message that both you and I are trying to spread, in addition to all of our other coaches that are PPA coaches, and just share that messaging, because I thought, here I am, a trainer in this space for 10 plus years, and I didn't know these things. So there's no way the mom walking into the gym knows these things.
Right.
So here I am.
Yes. Thank you. That is a wonderful, impressive background. I love it. And you touched on it a little bit, and I just wanted to tell the rest of you that one of the biggest reasons I asked Ashton on today is because she has such a unique perspective on the world that I think we need to have more conversations surrounding and more awareness about, and how to handle them. And I think that Ashton is the perfect person to talk about this because you have experience personally both infertility and pregnancy loss. Mm-hmm. And so my first question was, when did your story with infertility start?
Well, like I mentioned, I married my high school sweetheart. So we got married very young. I mean, we've been together for a long time. So we're like, well, we know each other, like, let's do this thing. So we got married right out of college. We were 21 and 22. And if I actually want to be completely honest, my infertility story goes back to the age of 16, but I didn't know it yet. I suffered from no one knew it at the time, a condition called endometriosis. So I would have really, really painful periods, really painful. Like I would black out. I would have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Like it was horrible. And the scary part about it is it wasn't with every cycle. I never knew like when I call them attacks. I never knew when they were going to happen. And a lot of doctors dismissed it like, oh, you're just like have a little pain, like you can't handle the cramping. But also during that time, I was not having regular periods, being an athlete and running. And I always say if I could go back and be an athlete again, like I'd be a lot better athlete. But not eating enough, not sleeping enough, overtraining, going home after practices and doing more running. Like I was really overtraining my body and I'd go months without a cycle. And I thought it was great. Um,
Right.
what we now know, right?
Right. But now we know
But
better.
anyway, so as I continued to go through my 20s, these quote unquote attacks that would maybe last an hour started to last longer and longer. And when I got married, it got to the point where my husband, Andrew, would physically have to leave work and come home and take care of me. And I continued to tell doctors, like, I've never had a baby, but it literally felt like contractions, like these waves of pain that would come over me. And there'd be a couple times, like if I got home from work, oh, somewhat okay, or if the attack happened, like I would pass out on the floor and I wouldn't know how long I was out on the floor. So, I mean, it was really scary having these episodes happen. So in 2015 is when we got married in 2013, 2015 is when we started to have kids. Like, so we're still young. We're 23 and 24 years old, still really young. We wanted to have all our kids by the time we were 30. And so when we started trying, like it wasn't working, but we knew in the background that I had this complication the more we started to learn about it. Um, so it was in January of 2016 that I finally like reached out to my mom. You know, I think every daughter aspires to be able to tell their parents, like, surprise, like we're expecting, you know, that whole thing. And that's just a dream I think every woman has, is to be able to do that. So I had a really, really bad episode. It had lasted like 12 plus hours. I think I just got home from the ER
Oh,
because it was so bad. It was so bad. And my mom
man.
told me about this practitioner. So long story short, we went down this NAPRO technology is what we ended up going through. And I ended up needing to have surgery because of the endometriosis. The only way that you can remove endometriosis is by physically going inside and scraping it out of your body. And it's a weird disease. Like for some women, it really affects them and affects their fertility. And for some women, it doesn't affect them at all. So, in the degree or the amount of endometriosis doesn't affect either. But for those that don't know, basically what endometriosis is, it's the cells, the lining that makes up your uterus is growing outside of the uterus. So when you're having a period, those cells are shedding or trying to shed. And that's what creates the pain that you're experiencing outside of the uterus because those cells shouldn't be there. How they get there, nobody really knows. I don't know. But anyway, so I had my first surgery in the fall of 2016. And during that time, like we've done a lot of blood tests, thyroid, just like checking everything. I had some other complications, low progesterone, low thyroid. I think those were like the big ones, but they also wanted to test my husband. He's like, okay, yeah, I'll get tested. And it was after my surgery when they had me come in for my post-op. You know, she kind of says what she did in the surgery. She removed the endometriosis, you know, a couple of other things, checked the fallopian tubes, opened them up, everything, you know, was good. And then she turned to my husband, and I will never forget this moment ever. She says, and did you know that you have very rare sperm count? And my husband was like, what? And she's like, yeah, 5.
No.
Single digits. Yeah, I kid you not, single digits 5. And if you know anything about fertility, if you are under 15 million, it's considered low. And my husband was at 5. And
I've
then
never.
she also, What's that?
I'm sorry, I just never heard that in my life.
Yeah. So like we were both like just like completely taken back. And then she goes on to say, because during this ultrasound, so like NAPRO, they really try to get to like the natural, like the root cause. So they want to look at everything from your hormones to what your uterus looks like, what your fallopian tubes look like, and then they also look at like the ovulation. So like for that particular cycle, like I had to go in on certain days, and then leading up to ovulation, I had to go in every single day. And what they were wanting to see is that your follicle grow and then eventually rupture. And so for that particular cycle, and then she's like, yeah, and you didn't ovulate. She said, you grew a follicle, but it never released. So here my husband and I are. He has 5 sperm, and I didn't ovulate. And it was right before Christmas. And it was this like, what I mean, what are we gonna do? And she's like, well, you can go and get retested. It might be a bad result. Well, it came back the same. I think it maybe came back 6 or something like that. Um, and so it was awful. I mean, so here we
That's
are literally at rock bottom wanting to become parents, and we have a woman that didn't ovulate and a man that has no sperm. So during that time, it was really a lot of deep conversations that we never thought that we would, have. So of course, we go and get him looked at, and he ends up having a surgery for like basically it's like a varicose vein that grows on a man's scrotum. That varicose veins create heat, and that could be affecting his sperm count. Well, it didn't. But I did in the process like put him on some supplements, and that did help increase his count to, let's see, when we froze it, it was 1 million and he had 100,000 viable. So we froze that sample. We didn't know what we were going to do with it at the time. Like we come from a Catholic background, so the whole idea of IVF is very, very controversial. And I also knew deep down though that I had this issue. Like I had to fix me. Like I wasn't ovulating. I obviously I had low progesterone, like all of these other issues, like I needed to be healed. So we continued down the natural path, the trying every single month. And pretty much every single month for 2 years, I had to go in and check if ovulation was happening. And during that time, what I learned about my body was that when I was under a lot of stress, now I was probably not doing the proper exercising, and we can touch on that later. But if I was in a really stressful time at work, I wouldn't ovulate. I would grow the follicle good, but it would not rupture. So, like 3 to 4 times a year, I would not rupture on my own. Now, I would rupture with the help of fertility or ovulation enhancing. I was on letrozole, is what I was to help boost ovulation. But even with that, I still had low progesterone. So I had to be put on progesterone supplementation in order to help my body, if it were to become pregnant, to sustain that pregnancy. So we went on that for 2 years. And then finally, we just reached the point where we've been doing all the things, and we finally felt that we were both in a position that like we had this sample that we froze 2 years ago, and here we are. Like we can't continue on this path. It was beginning to affect our marriage. It was just beginning to affect a lot of different things. We had to go elsewhere. So
That's a lot to go through in such a short amount of time. And what a
yeah.
shock to have learned that information. And how did you navigate finally getting to the point where you could get pregnant? How did that look and how did that feel?
Well, I had a second surgery just before we ended up doing IVF. So I had a second surgery 2 years after my previous surgery. I was having like some mid-cycle bleeding, and it came. I had a polyp, a pretty decent sized polyp that needed to remove. So she's like, "Well, we're doing the surgery anyway, so let's double check endometriosis." Like I wasn't having those pains anymore, and that was like amazing. Like as soon as I had that first surgery, like all my period pain went away. It was
Wow.
amazing. But I also had what is called an ovarian wedge reduction, and most people are like, "You have what?" So I am not a. I had PCOS as well, but I'm not a common like PCOS candidate. Like most people think PCOS, like you're overweight, you have a hard time losing weight, you might be like kind of on the pre-diabetic spectrum. I didn't have any of that, but my body was very much able to produce a lot of follicles, and it had a hard time creating a dominant follicle. So I had what is called ovarian wedge reduction, and in the NAPRO world, by taking my ovaries were 3 times their normal size. So by taking they literally like think of it like a piece of pizza, and they go in and they take a cut out of the ovary and then sew it back together to its normal size. That like helps rejuvenate the ovary, and the body starts producing and going through its cycle like it's supposed to, and it worked for me. So we had done that for 6 months after, and then after that surgery, like 6 months in, it was like, all right, like that was literally our last straw. Like my husband's numbers aren't improving, like we know like the chance, like it'd literally be an act of God for us to get pregnant naturally. And at that point we started having the discussions of IVF, knowing that we'd have to pay for it out of pocket. And for my husband and I, it was, we were going to give it one shot. Like if it didn't work, then we would start to look at adoption. And I think that's something that when you go through fertility treatment, like a lot of people are like, oh, well, you can just adopt. But when you have a desire to have a biological child, that was very strong in us. Like we just had this calling that we couldn't give up yet. Like we both just felt that. And that was kind of our answer to, okay, we're going to try this. We're going to give IVF one shot. And if it doesn't work, then that's our sign that we aren't going to have biological children. And it's a hard conversation to have, but ultimately that's what led us down that path. So this was almost 4 years after, almost 3.5 years into trying to conceive.
And so you do your round of IVF, and is that your oldest son that you have now? No, Oliver.
Oliver.
Oliver's your oldest, yes.
Yes.
Oliver's he's how old is he now?
Oliver just turned 3 in November.
Wow.
So yeah, so when we went through IVF, I told my husband, because when you go through infertility, you become like, you just want to learn all the things. Like you really like dive deep into trying to understand, and you learn all these things because your doctors are talking about it. But you almost get so caught up in the numbers, and like you can't give up on a month. Like you can't, like you have to have sex tonight. Like we can't pass up this opportunity. It becomes very obsessive, and it was putting me in a very dark mental state. Like it was starting to affect, like I said, my marriage, affect how I showed up at work. It just, especially working in a YMCA with lots of kids and families, like it was really starting to, bother me. So when we decided to do IVF, I think we decided in October, and we started IVF in January. I said, I'm going to completely surrender to this process. Like I've been trying for almost 4 years to control everything. And this is something that I'm going to control what I can. And then once I start the process, like I don't know enough about it, and I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole to try and learn everything. And I'm just going to surrender to that process. So things that I controlled was, my nutrition, how I exercise. I started to do less. I started doing like fertility yoga off this YouTube, and I hated it. I hated all of it. But then my body started to crave it. Like once I got into the process of it, like my body craved that yoga at night, like just to bring my body back down. I started journaling. And I wrote that journal like I was speaking to Oliver, and I still have that journal, but I started journaling my thoughts, my process, what I was thinking, what was happening. And that really helped me go into IVF with just a whole different, it was a great experience for us, but just a whole different outlook on the outcome.
That is beautiful. I love that you were able to approach it in that way. And I think I hope that if any of you are listening that are going through similar to what Ashton's gone through with infertility and navigating IVF, what a great way to approach it, to say, these are the things I control. I'm going to surrender to the rest. You were very mindful, and I'm sure you were very prayerful.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was very, a growing experience in that way. And and so then now let's fast forward a little bit, and you've had Oliver, and so then what comes next in your journey with infertility, and then ultimately what happens next with your loss?
So Oliver was born in November of 19, and we moved up to our current location like 3 months after he moved. So that's when I stopped like my full-time job and I officially became like a stay-at-home mom. So during that time, I'm exercising, like I'm doing all the things, like I am so proud of myself. Like I felt like I had like this fit pregnancy, like just enjoyed the basking of the glory, like working out at the Y, and everyone's like, dang girl, like look at you go, like look at you pregnant, all these things. And it was during like my postpartum experience with Oliver that I was having like debilitating back pain. Like it was awful. And I'd always dealt with back pain my entire life, but never to this degree and never like this long. And I finally told my husband, like, I gotta go get this checked out. Like, this is really embarrassing. Like, I'm a trainer and I can't fix this. Like, this is embarrassing. Um, so when I saw a PT and he told me, like, well, you have a really strong body, but your core is really, really weak. And I had already kind of like started floating in like this core and pelvic floor space.
Mhm.
And that's when I got like really passionate about this. So I was looking for CEU, so I like completely rehabbed my whole like my own programming, like starting from the very basics. Like here's a supine march, and here's how to control your pelvis and your core during it. And it was hard. It was so hard, like relearning how to breathe, all of this process. And I just thought, and the more I learned, I was like, this is fascinating. Like, this is really fascinating. So in the fall, I think November, December, I was looking for CEUs through my NSCA. And I came across Brianna's certification. And I was like, hey, like, I'm going to do this. I don't have time to get it done in January or December before, like, whatever. So I found some other pregnancy related, because I wanted it to be pregnancy related. Like, I kept telling my husband, like, I have this inkling, like, I want to do this, but I was too scared, like, going into the online space in order to, do this thing. So I need to learn more. Like, this will help me. And he agreed, and he's like, do it. So I started that certification in January of 2021. And just prior to that, in November of 20, with IVF, with who we're with, you have to wait 1 year after you have a live birth before you can get pregnant again. And now that I know what I know, like at first I was like really disappointed, but now I know, like, they believe mom needs to be healed. It's better for mom, it's better for baby that you are completely healed for a year postpartum before you get pregnant again. So we transferred in November of 2020. All, COVID's happening and all that stuff is happening. So we transferred in November 2020, and it took right away. I was flabbergasted, like literally flabbergasted, because I did not feel, I kind of felt pregnant, but I did not have the same symptoms that I did with Oliver. Like I literally laughed at the nurse when she called and told me our results. And then let's see, December 21st. And with this one, we decided not, like, we wanted that opportunity to tell our family, like to surprise them. So we didn't tell them at all that we were traveling across the state to do these treatments. And I'll get back to the PPA. It all does connect here. Okay.
All right.
So we, do it, we take Oliver, we stay with my aunt and uncle, we do it. And then December 21st, we go in for your 7 week, and that's where they see if there's a heartbeat. And so it was right before Christmas. And even the tech was like, these appointments really make me nervous right before Christmas. Like, I really hope that this is a good outcome for you. And sure enough, like there was his heartbeat, like thump, 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 it was, everything looked beautiful. And so we told our families at Christmas, surprised them. Like that was awesome that we were able to like achieve that. So pregnancy progresses, and I had to be with a new OB because we're living in a new area. And so I start that PPA cert in January, and I finished it in middle of February. And I remember taking the test. I was so happy that I passed. And like a few days earlier, like Oliver was just like sitting with me, and he was kind of at that age where like he was really walking and like just sitting still was like odd. And I remember like taking a picture and, you know, I looked like crap. It was night. It was like right before bedtime. And I remember taking that picture and I was like, we didn't know what we were having. And I was like, you know, here's my kids. Here I am, like doing the thing. I'm about ready to take this test. And, you know, like I was just feeling like I was starting to get like a lot of confidence in myself. And I took the test, I passed it. And I think I passed it on December or February 12th is when I believe I passed it, somewhere right around in there. And then on February 16th is when I had my doctor's appointment for my 16-week appointment. Go in for that appointment, and I told my husband, like, you don't need to come. Like, there's no reason for you to come. Like, they're gonna check my blood pressure, have me pee in a cup, and measure my fundal, and off I go, right? And my mother-in-law was coming to watch Oliver, and so I headed off to my appointment, and I had a weird feeling. Like, you know, I think as a mom, we just have like this weird feeling. And for this pregnancy, I was trying to, like with Oliver, I was always testing his heart rate. Like I had to I was very obsessive about it. And I said, nope, like I didn't have time that day. And as I walked out the door, I said, no, you got to trust yourself. Like you have to trust that everything is okay. Like baby is okay. You just heard it last week because we announced at 15 weeks. And so you just heard it. You checked it before you announced it and everything was fine. So I get to the doctor's appointment. You know, they ask you questions and they go to try to find the heart rate and he couldn't find it. And that wasn't alarming to me because he couldn't find it at 12 weeks and I had to go and have the ultrasound. So it did not alarm me at all. But now looking back, like his face said everything. Like at 16 weeks, like when you see a 16-week fetus, like you should be able to find that heart rate. So I go back and I knew right away, like as soon as the ultrasound, like you could just tell it didn't look right. And that's when he said, you know, I'm sorry, Ashton, but the baby is gone. And in that moment, I I just completely like I could not speak. I like tears just instantly, you know, come to me because here I am, like I'm past the 12-week point. Like that's the magical point, right? Like no one should have a miscarriage after 12 weeks. That's what they tell me. Like that's the safe zone after you hit the 12-week mark. Um, and all I could think about was trying to get a hold of my husband. And so they asked if there was anything they could do. And I said, you need to contact my husband. Like I knew I was in no state to drive home, but I was in no state to tell them anything. They found my phone, called him, and he was on his way over. And they're like, well, we want you to go have a formal ultrasound. So I go and sit in this room by myself for a really long period of time. And this is where I guess my mission is to begin to change this and the way women are treated when they experience pregnancy loss, because how I was treated wasn't fair, it wasn't right. I don't know if it's really anyone's problem or if there's really anyone to blame, but I know my story is not the rarity. It's the majority of women experience this during pregnancy loss. So I go to this room, I'm sitting for a long period of time. Finally, the tech comes in, and you know, you're in the baby space. Like there's pictures of baby, you know, like it's a baby ultrasound space. And they go in, and the screen was already on. Well, the first thing she does is shut it off. And as she's performing this ultrasound, like I'm trying to, out of the corner of my eye, see her screen. And I asked her, like, so she does her thing, and I asked her if she could tell if it was a boy or a girl, and she said, well, I really can't tell based on how it's lying. She said, I think it's a boy, but she said, I can't say. Like, it just, the way baby's lying, we can't see the anatomy. And then I asked her, I said, is there any way I can get any pictures? And she puts her hand on my chest and she says, oh, honey, you think about it for a few days. If you want those pictures, you reach back out to us and we'll get you those pictures. And again, looking back, like how wrong is that? Like that's my baby. Like that is a human baby inside of me. That's my child. And again, I didn't have any sort of cognizability to argue with her. And then, so finally my husband shows up and we wait for hours. Like, I kid you not, my appointment was at 1 o'clock. We did not leave this hospital until 5. And we sat alone for, like, I sat alone for a really long time waiting for my husband. really long time, probably almost an hour by myself waiting for him. And yeah, so long story short, thank God the doctor that wanted us, because we couldn't deliver in that hospital because we're second trimester. So the bigger city that got back to us wanted us to come in the next day for an appointment. And I look back and I like, Gabriel knew that we needed to go see that doctor because the way we were being treated was so wrong. Um, and one of the first things that doctor said to me was, there's nothing that that baby is doing, like, and they couldn't tell what it is. So we, at this time, we're about ready to birth a baby and we didn't know its gender either. He said, if you want to take a week, take a week. If you want to take 2 weeks, take 2 weeks. Whatever you need to do, there's no harm that that baby is inside of you. It's not causing any harm. So ultimately we decided to deliver. So he was born, I always get it wrong. I'm pretty sure it's February 26th. That's really bad, but pretty sure we went in for induction on February 25th and he was born on February 26th. And I regular labor, and birthed him. And again, we didn't know if it was a boy or girl. And, yeah, so it was our second son. So anyway, so going back to the PPA thing, I think there was like a greater calling for me in fit. Like, I literally think that sometimes I look back and I think that that was like one of the last living moments, because I wasn't feeling movement yet. One of the last times that Oliver and his brother were together. And then me finishing, when I passed that test, I almost think that he passed away the next day, like based on his gestational like age and how far he was always measuring 3 or 4 days ahead. And when I had my appointment, it was 3 days past like my true 16 date. And I passed that test on Thursday or Friday before my doctor's appointment. So it's like this weird, like, like I finished, like, it's just this, like, you need to do this. Like, there's a reason that all of those events kind of happened the way that they did, as far as Gabriel's loss and finishing the PPNA cert.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is very raw and very real and very amazing that you are now on this mission to help moms be treated better than you were and to be able to support them through something that is so traumatic and so hard, something that is so difficult to heal from and is probably a very not linear journey of healing as well. And so, my question for you now is, what are helpful comments or gestures or things that we can be doing to help moms through loss? Or rather, what are things not to say or things not to do? Whatever way you want to approach that question, what would you say?
Well, the first thing is that, I mean, she gave birth. I mean, I think a lot of times we think that miscarriage isn't birth, but it is very much birth. It doesn't matter if that child was 5 weeks old or if that child was 16 or 37 weeks old. Like, it is still a child and it's still birth. Like, the only way that that fetus, that child leaves you is through birth. Like, pregnancy always has to happen in birth. So I think that's like the biggest thing, is recognizing that woman, whether she gave birth in the hospital, but unfortunately a lot of those women are giving birth in their home, in their bathroom, on the toilet, because they're told to go home and it's going to be a painful period. Well, it's not. It's labor, it's contractions, like, you gave birth. So I think the biggest thing is just recognizing that and supporting her, just like you would a postpartum mom. Like, things that were really helpful for us were people that brought over food, because, I mean, yes, I gave birth, but just like the mental capacity to go ahead and do those things. A lot of people just like reached out and let us know that they were thinking of us or praying for us, like, not like trying to impede or ask questions, but just like stating that they were here for us. And then if like I found like gifts were very comforting, but I would kind of hesitate and tell people, like, think of gifts that they would want to display in their home, like, not to make their home look like a funeral home. Like, some of the quotes can get very I don't know what the word is, but just like funeral homey is the best way to describe it. So we got like a keychain, and we got like a visor clip, just like different unique things that we could feel Gabriel's presence in our home without it feeling like if somebody were just walking to our home and didn't know our story, like they probably wouldn't even like those things wouldn't really stand out to them. And if you do like, want to give like flowers, I always suggest to people like don't make them real flowers, like especially fresh cut. Like it's just a reminder that those things are gonna die. And that can be really triggering for women. So I always try to pick like silk arrangements if I'm doing it for another mom, just because they're always gonna be beautiful all the time. And it's not something that she's gonna feel guilty about, like if it's a plant that she wasn't able to keep alive. It's just a reminder that like, oh, I failed at having a kid, like many parents think or moms think, and I also failed at keeping this plant alive. So just kind of think about those things if you're thinking about wanting to do a gift. I received a necklace and I absolutely love that. It had his birthstone and then just like his initial on it, G. That was really touching. So just think outside of the box as far as like your gifts and that sort of thing. Um, Things not to say, and I received this was like, well, if I didn't have my loss, I wouldn't have XYZ, like naming their next kid. That feels really like helpful or comforting. But especially if you come from a world of infertility and IVF, like you want every single one of those children. I mean, it's no different than a person that naturally conceived, but I think when you come from IVF and infertility, you have more invested in that child. Like we can't really nilly go out and have a good night and come home and have sex and get pregnant, if that makes sense. Like I don't mean that to be downplaying the ability for anyone to conceive, but I mean we had a lot of money, emotion, like just our story wrapped into that child, and to lose that, I mean it's not only like it feels like it's almost for nothing. Like we went through all of that for this. And it's really trying to, in our brains, like go through the process of, okay, how can we see the positive of going through this, this sort of experience? So just saying, like, just watching what you say with that, just knowing that you can't fix this. Like, don't try and fix a mom. Like don't say something and then say, well, at least you were able to get pregnant, or um, it will happen again. Like we don't know those things. So really the best thing that you can say is, I am so sorry for your loss. I am so sorry that you are not able to meet your child. If it has a name, like say their name. I'm so sorry that you're not able to meet Gabriel on this side of the earth, on this side. Like you will meet him in heaven, but you aren't meeting him earth side. Um, and then like some people offered to take Oliver, but Oliver was really comforting to me, so I didn't want him to leave. So I think it just depends on the mom and getting a feel for her. But that's really the big thing, is like just let the mom speak. Like you can't fix it, and that's kind of like our tendency as humans, is we want to try and fix everything, and this is just something you can't fix. You got to let her. You just got to let her speak.
Yes. Yes, definitely agree that there are a lot of situations that maybe will never be fixed, but that we just need to feel and be allowed to feel them.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to touch. I totally agree with you about flowers, because this is kind of going back, but I wanted to comment on that because I also feel that way about flowers, but I have not experienced pregnancy loss. I have experienced sibling loss. My sister
Mm-hmm.
died in 2001, and so it was a funeral. Of course, there was going to be flowers, but our house. I was in elementary school. I was in fifth grade or something. I can't remember. 2001. I was 10. So our house was full of flowers for months,
Mm-hmm.
and they all died, and it smelled like flowers. So to this day, I'm 31. The smell of flowers completely brings me back to funeral, like dying
It's
flowers in your
triggering.
dining room, right? And so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that you brought that up, because I would never have thought. I mean, I also I don't ask for flowers. I don't like receiving them, but I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
have thought or even remember that to give flowers to someone else. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that is such a good comment and good thing to think about. Like flowers are triggering, and we don't think of that because they're beautiful, right? They're
Yeah, yeah, you think like that's a really beautiful gesture, like that's what everyone does, but there's just like so much wrapped into those
Yeah,
flowers. I'm so sorry you experienced the loss of your sister.
that's okay. It has been, many years of healing for that too, and that is okay. My mom always says, like, this too shall pass. We all are able to move forward and still carry it, but be able to be stronger over time to carry it.
Mm-hmm.
And so now let's talk about what happened after. And you have just recently had a rainbow baby.
I think a week after you, right? Aren't
Yeah,
our
like
boys like
very similar.
are
Like, yeah, we had a baby around the
or
same
something like
time.
that?
So, what emotions did you experience not only right when you found out you were pregnant with this rainbow baby, but then throughout that pregnancy? What was that like emotionally?
Well, we waited 6 months. That was a recommendation from the doctor that we worked at. He was in maternal fetal medicine. And he told me that I needed to wait 6 months. And again, coming from an infertility background, like 6 months is like, that feels like forever. Like, here I am, I wanted to be a young mom, and here's my brain going tick, 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 like this constant, ticking. So during that time, I told Andrew, I said, if I want to get pregnant again, like I know this is something that we want, but I said, if I'm going to do this, I have to get some emotional help. Like I have so much like self-doubt, like I have so much guilt that I did something wrong, like and thinking about getting pregnant again is just like really making me nervous. So I said I would like to start working with a mental health therapist to help me navigate these emotions that I'm feeling. Cause I just like when I say I hit rock bottom, like that was literally rock bottom. Like first 4 or 5 years of infertility, and now I lost a child in the second trimester. Like I just didn't know what to do. So I started working with my therapist. I still work with her today. And that was just looking back, like I should have started working with somebody during infertility because there was a lot of processing that I went through that was, a lot of anger was directed towards our past, our infertility past, and it came up in this like why did this happen to me? Like we've already endured so much. Like why do we have to endure this too? Like this isn't fair, why, so just a lot of those things. So when I started working with her, I was able to start uncovering these things, and she really helped process not only my past but started to prepare imagining myself pregnant again and just helping me navigate through those emotions and how I could prepare for the upcoming pregnancy. And I was said 6 months, like that's all the longer I'm waiting. And so that would put us in August. So when we picked our date, it felt it was kind of like the whole pregnancy was very like full circle for me. The date that we did the transfer was exactly 6 months. Like I was walking into an IVF clinic to get pregnant again, and 6 months prior, I was walking into a hospital to induce for my son. So like it was kind of like great, and like all these like milestones, like 16 weeks. So anyway, so we transferred him, and great numbers right away. But immediately when I got pregnant, the anxiety started to like, it just hit me really, really hard because they told me my progesterone was really low. So I'm like freaking out, like I'm going to lose him again. Like I know my body, all these different things. So what was very helpful for me was, again, I had my journal going with Oliver. I had a journal going with Gabriel, and I started journaling again with this child. And again, it was just speaking my heart, like speaking, like just talking to this child, trying to create like a bonding experience. So with this pregnancy, Andrew and I both agreed, like, especially for me, it was very difficult. I never felt bonded to Gabriel. I felt like we never celebrated him because we waited until 15 weeks. We didn't know why. It was COVID. We weren't seeing anyone. I finally told Andrew one day, I'm like, we should probably tell people we're pregnant. And so with this pregnancy, I didn't want that. Like I wanted to celebrate his life soon. I wanted other people to celebrate with us because no matter what happens, I wanted people to be able to celebrate us, because last time we told people, and then 10 days later we told them we weren't pregnant anymore. So so we agreed that we would wait until our 7-week appointment to make sure that the pregnancy was viable. Because with IVF, you go in one time, get a blood draw, then you check and make sure it doubles, and then after that, you sit and wait until your 7-week appointment. So saw his heart rate. I mean, just when I say like crippling anxiety, it's crippling. Like every single moment, like going into a doctor's appointment, I could just like throw up. Like, and it just felt like an eternity. Like even if it was probably only 5 minutes, it felt like an eternity waiting for things to happen. And the other thing that I really tried to do was make it real. Like I felt with Gabriel, it never felt real, it felt surreal. So I really tried to make this pregnancy feel real. So I documented just like the weirdest things. Like I document us in the car, and I would document the time, and I would document us walking up the stairs, and I'd always take a selfie in the bathroom, like just so I had it to like look back and be like, this happened, like this really did happen. So when we found out that we were pregnant, so like just the week prior to that, so like August 3rd would have been was Gabriel's due date. So over that like time frame is when I announced my business, the mission behind my business, what I was trying to do with my business. I wasn't like offering services, but I was just saying like, here's me putting myself out here because of my son. Like, so everything is kind of wrapped around him. And so when we found out we were pregnant at 7 weeks, I just like wrote this like speech, and I just read it, and I just explained why, like just why we're telling people early, because I think it's dumb that we wait until 12 weeks. Like so many women, especially when I went through loss, like I had all reached out and was like, yeah, me too. Like I went through pregnancy. Like I had no clue, like my mom's friends and just all these people. And then I learned that it's 1 in 4, like 1 in 4 women experience pregnancy loss. And why are we not talking about it? Why are we not celebrating babies? Like why does 12 weeks, this magical period, when it's crap, it's garbage, in my
Why is it
opinion.
taboo to talk about it in
Yeah,
general?
why is it taboo? Like why are we treating these women as like why do women have to go back to work 2 days after they miscarry? Like we could get into a whole nother topic on that. But so we announced very early. We announced at 7 weeks, and I shared that on my business page, my social media page, and I had just an outpouring of like, yes, like this is awesome. Like, thank you, and all this stuff. But and then like just like throughout that pregnancy, it was just that crippling fear. Like it was always this holding my breath, waiting for the next bad thing to happen. Like it was every doctor's appointment, and very fortunate that the doctor, same one that we worked with Gabriel, was who we worked with through our pregnancy with Mason. And he said, if you want to come here every week, come here every week. If you want to come here every other week, whatever you want, he said, there is no research to support this, but he said, I know from working with moms he's been in the business for a really long time. Moms who go through loss need reassurance.
Mm-hmm.
And moms who are reassured have a better, like that mental aspect of it is very beneficial to a mom that's gone through loss. So he said, if you, whatever you want. So we agreed to 2 times, or like bi-weekly, but it was more, or excuse me, bi-monthly, but it was closer to like every 10 days. Like, and that was like perfect for me, because I could feel like on day 8, 9, and 10, like I'm like, I gotta go, like I gotta go check. Like I didn't want to be, fortunately, like Gabriel only passed a few days before, but I've also heard of some moms where their baby died 2 weeks, prior to them finding out. So I didn't want that to be like me. Like if it
Right.
happened, I just wanted to know that he had gone. So the other part that again goes back to like that bonding, is we wanted to find out the gender very early, because I wanted to feel connected to him. I never wanted to be in a position that I birthed a baby that I didn't know the gender of ever again. And then we pretty much had his name picked out really early too. So that was really helpful for me, as far as just like bonding with him, talking to him, writing in his journal, like putting his name in there, and all those things. But yeah, it was hard. I mean, it's literally the hardest thing that I've ever, there was very little excitement. Like you'd have just a tiny bit of excitement and then it'd be left to like just worry. And
Right.
you know, I had some other complications, placenta previa. I had some bleeding, so just like other things wrapped into that. I had a 5-day hospital stay after that bleeding because they were afraid of preterm labor. That was like at 30 weeks. And then
Oh,
you're talking about NICU stay and preemie and
goodness.
all these things. But yeah, it was just it's hard. I mean, it's like when I say suffocating,
Yeah.
just like holding your breath. That's the best way to describe it.
Well, in pregnancy, without even having experienced loss, is always, at least in my opinion, stressful anyway, because
Mm-hmm.
you don't know. Everything is so out of your, well, like we were talking about, we have things that are in our control, but at the end of the day, so much is out of our control. So to have already have pregnancy be that way and then have to then have the experience that you've had double down on you to
Mm-hmm.
make it so debilitatingly stressful. What was it like to finally get to delivery day?
It was like this biggest exhale. Like I can remember when he came out, like I just like, you heard him cry and you just finally felt like I could breathe. Like it's this weird thing. Like a mom that experiences loss, like I think you feel like, especially if you have kids prior, I feel like I'm better at keeping them alive on the outside than I am on the inside. Like that's a really negative way to look at your body, but it's something that's very real that moms experience, especially ones that experience like multiple miscarriages in a row. That you just feel like you are a better mom when your child can get earthside, that you've or physically got them outside of the womb. But I mean, it was just like just instantly. And I was really worried about bonding with him, if I would bond with him, because when I found out he was a boy, that kind of worried me because I was really worried that people would be like, oh, well, you still got your boy. Like, that sort of like trying to, again, say a positive thing when it's a negative thing. So I was kind of worried that like, are people going to think that Mason replaced Gabriel or, those sorts of things. But immediate, I mean, it wasn't like that at all. It was just, again, fear and anxiety being worked up. But it was just, I could just breathe. Like that chapter isn't over yet because we want to have more children. But I just felt like it was a big victory for us.
Do you feel like his birth was in a way redemptive for you?
It was redemptive in a lot of ways. My birth with Oliver wasn't what I want. I mean, I went again. You're a first time mom. I didn't know anything. I didn't know. I was trusting my doctor with a lot of things. I mean, we did do a natural birth course like at home. My husband and I worked through that, but yeah, like I look back at my birth with Oliver and people are like, how did you not get wheeled off to a C-section? Like I was in labor for 31 plus hours. I pushed for 4 hours and 23 minutes. And, so ended up with an episiotomy. That's what ended up getting him out because I was getting exhausted. But a lot of people are just like in the birth, now that I know and talking to doulas and pelvic floor PTs, like they're just shocked I wasn't wheeled off to a C-section.
Mm.
So in a lot of ways I wanted, and that's what I kind of went into with like even Gabriel's pregnancy, like taking everything that I learned in the course, that, here I am, I was just ending my second trimester and I'm like, I know all these things about exercise. I know the core, like, I'm so excited to like document and share this with people. As far as like starting a business. And then when I lost him, like I couldn't start the business. Like I couldn't do those things. I don't even know if I shared that I was certified. So there was that wrapped into it too, that I wanted a different birth experience. I wanted to go natural. So I hired a doula because, I just felt like, our husbands, like, they're very supportive, but they don't know birth. Like, I don't know, I know more about birth now than I did then, but like, he doesn't know. Like, I mean, I don't expect him to know, but I just felt like I wanted to prevent that from happening. So it was kind of redemptive in both ways as far as the pregnancy loss and just having a whole different birth experience than I did with Oliver. And it was, I mean,
Was good.
I went from a 31+ hour labor to, he was pretty much start labor, out labor in the time that I was pushing Oliver. Cause it was like
Wow.
5 hours and 20,
Ooh,
something like that. Like, I
that's
mean, I still pushed for an hour and a half cause he was a freaking sunny side up baby. Um, but, and still had an episiotomy because they thought he was stuck. But yeah. And then when he came out, like, here's like the really, it gives me chills still. The doula and nurse, like, look, our doctor, they looked at me and they're like, did you know that he had a true knot? I was like, what? And they're like, he had a true knot. They're like, look, and they held up the umbilical cord, a true knot in his cord. So we could have lost him at any point. We could have lost him during the birth. We could have lost, I mean, because that knot would have happened when he was just a little pipsqueak, you know, doing his
yeah.
little, I mean, and now looking at his personality, it makes total sense that there was a knot in his cord because the kid doesn't,
Oh
the
my
kid doesn't
gosh.
still at any means. But I mean, like, that gave me chills that could have tightened at any point and we could have lost him.
Oh my gosh. That is wild. And isn't it so interesting though how sometimes the birth experience matches the child's personality? That has been my experience too.
Oliver stubborn.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, and what about a beautiful experience that you've had all throughout, even the hard things. And now you are, you're in your business now. You're posting on social media. You are PMPA certified as well, obviously, for a while now. And through all of this experience with Gabriel, you had started posting on social media before, and now at this point now, with your postpartum now, you're running your business. What is your mission, your biggest mission, and what are you hoping to? How are you hoping to grow this year?
Well, as I mentioned, I got into the PPA to fill the gap between pregnancy and postpartum. I think that's what we all PPA coaches are trying to strive for, is to get better information out to moms. Because it's vague, it's outdated, what we're telling moms right now, and it's fear-based, if I'm being completely honest.
It is.
Yeah, yeah, both you and I know that.
Real.
But now that I have experienced, you know, I experienced the infertility prior to becoming the PPE, but it wasn't like a big driving mission for me to achieve it. I was more like pregnancy, postpartum, you know, focusing in on that.
Yeah.
And then I experienced the loss. And that's when it opened my eyes that, like, these two populations, infertility is 1 in 8. 1 in 8 couples will experience infertility, and pregnancy loss is 1 in 4. So that's a really big population that is very underserved. Like, if we think pregnancy and postpartum women are underserved, moms that are walking, and I believe if you are desiring to be a mom, that you're a mom, even if you don't have a baby in your arms. Like, that's kind of the slogan that I have with my business, is I call everyone a mama if you're longing to have a child, if you're actively trying to have a child.
I love that.
So it's a very underserved population. So I'm trying to shed light into not only like serving those moms, but also serving coaches like yourself that maybe have not experienced pregnancy loss, have not gone through infertility treatments. How do you work with that population? Because that population is going to come into your doors, it's going to come into your space, and they have special different considerations that need to be, you know, looked at. And, you know, not just physical, but just like emotional. Like, there's a lot of emotional trauma that the body holds onto that is wrapped into serving those clients as well. And, you know, how they show up in exercise can greatly be affected by the trauma that they've experienced. So, and I also just want to normalize the topic. Like, how can I support a mom? Like, my friend just went through pregnancy loss. Like, how can I support her? Or, you know, what are things that we can do? What are things that we can say to moms? Like, even just changing, like, instead of saying she had a miscarriage, she experienced pregnancy loss. You know, if we say she did, it makes her feel a lot of guilt. And I think that's where the narrative really needs to change, and it needs to change in healthcare. Like, she experienced pregnancy loss. There's nothing that she did. Like, miscarriage should not be a verb. It should be a, what is it, noun? I'm trying to get back to my English roots here, but I mean, just think of just even just how you say it is very empowering to taking that shame and guilt. Because I mean, that's the first thing. You're like, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong to experience that? So
Right.
creating awareness, and then just like I said, helping people like yourself to coach and help that population. So I'm all mamas are supported here, and I just feel that that's like my greater calling, in being a PPA coach, and serving all those moms.
I love it, and I'm so happy that's what you are doing because I've reached out to you before and had commented and messaged you thanking you for your content on Instagram because it is something I have little experience, no experience, but not little, no experience, and I need to know and understand how how it feels and how to connect and how to serve these moms. And
Mm-hmm.
I know there are so many out there that need this as well. And I want to be on this mission with you to be able to normalize and um, take the I don't know, to take the stigma away of talking about it. Because when I was a young mom in what was it, 2017, 2018, when I was a young mom, I I mean I was younger anyways, but I just like I had no desire to learn about it. I just didn't know how to connect with these moms. I'm just like, well, I don't have that problem. And I was very insensitive.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very I just my heart was in the wrong place with it. And I've gone through a lot of different experiences in life and different losses and different hard things. And I'm in a different place as a person and as a mom now. And I've seen and met enough people to realize that I needed to change how I was thinking about it and I needed to change my attitude. And I know though that there are still moms and people out there that are feeling the way that I did before and that it's not okay for me to have been that way. And like, oh yeah, I mean, I progressed and it's different now, but it's like the bottom line is the way that I was acting about it before is not okay and it's insensitive. And so if we can just have more open conversations about this, more education, you know, being able to support them and not judge them. Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that you felt really judged through a lot of
I did. I think that was like one of my biggest fears is, like I said, we just told everyone we were pregnant, and now we have to like untell, like we have to untell. But my biggest, I mean, and I've had other moms like reach out and just so inspired by our story that they too have opened up about their own story because they say like, I'm tired of battling this in the dark. Like I
mm,
am tired of people thinking that like, oh, they don't have issues, or that she's like, I want people to know that I'm a mom. And I think that that's really empowering for
yes,
moms. Like that is ultimately what we all want and desire. And I think that if we can normalize these conversations and not learn about the statistics after they happen, can really change the narrative and just how we treat ourselves. Because like I said, that was the first thing I wanted to know. Why, like, why did this happen to me, when in actuality a lot of stuff just happens, whether it's the chromosome, or it wasn't. I mean, a lot of it unfortunately is natural selection.
mm,
That sounds really harsh, but I mean, your body is pretty miraculous, and that if a fetus isn't developing properly, it knows that before you do. And there's nothing that you did wrong. There's nothing you ate. There's nothing you drank. There's no way that you exercised. There's no way that you lifted that box that caused your pregnancy loss.
yeah, there is a lot of misconception about exercise and pregnancy loss out
Yeah, yeah. So I think just that like fear, and then just showcasing that like you can still have movement, like exercise does not cause pregnancy loss. There is no study, there is no research to support that. That is a result of a pregnancy loss.
there. Right.
So
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I hope that we can continue to have these hard conversations to be able to let those moms know that have experienced loss that they are moms, that they did birth, and that they do matter and they shouldn't have to battle this in the dark. And I am so glad that you are a very strong and confident voice in this area. It's very needed. And I'm so grateful for what you taught me. And I hope that it continues on and on. And I know that your growth just in the online space has been amazing. And you are also doing so much in your community in real life. That's so funny. In person. And
Trying.
yes, and so it's inspiring and I'm grateful. And I just wanted to ask if there was any other last comments you had about this topic or that you would like to tell moms or anything like that as we finish up this conversation.
I think that just the biggest thing is share your story. I mean, if you don't feel comfortable sharing your story with the world, share your story with somebody. You don't have to internalize everything. And when I mean share your story, like more than just your husband, even more than just like your parents or your immediate family, like if you feel comfortable telling a close friend, tell a close friend because you're going to need that person at some point. And I would even encourage as far as telling your boss if you are in like the working space, because there's going to be times whether like you're doing infertility treatments that like if they know where you're coming from, they're going to have a compassionate heart. But if they're like, well, you're gone all the time and you're trying to hide it, unfortunately, that's just the way the workplace is. They're not going to have much sympathy for you. But if they understand where you're coming from and what you're trying to do, there can be a lot more sympathy. Or if you do experience pregnancy loss and you need to take a couple of days, they might just give you those couple of days and not make you have to like use your vacation or anything like that. So be comfortable sharing your story is probably the most powerful thing that I can encourage any mom. Like that's looking back on my infertility, I wish I would have shared our story, that I wish I would have been more open. I mean, our extended family knew, but I wish I would have been more open with sharing in the public. And now I have no shame in that, but I didn't share until I had I didn't share until we had a pregnancy. So I think your story can be really inspiring without even knowing it to the person sitting right next to you. Like I've just been blown away by the number of moms just in my own circle that I knew, like former athletes that I used to coach, and now they're becoming moms and they're facing those same struggles and they're reaching out for support, encouragement, just to like say, hey, I'm having a bad day. And that can be really powerful if you're willing to share and confide in somebody, with your story. And by sharing our stories is the only way that the narrative is going to change.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This
Well,
has
thank
been
you. This was
amazing.
great.
Thank you so much for sharing so openly, so deeply, something that is so personal. Thank you for sharing your story because it has inspired so many, me included. So, how can we find you on Instagram and your business?
Resilient.mama.fitness is where you can find me on Instagram. I have a webpage, resilientmamafitness.com. That is also, if you want to shoot me an email, resilientmamafitness@gmail.com. So it's all around that, but on the social, there's a period, resilient period, mama period, fitness is where you can find me. And if you need support, or I always tell moms that I am always here. I am always a listening ear if you need encouragement, support, just in like your infertility and pregnancy loss journey. Like if you just need someone to confide in or cry to, I'm here.
Perfect. And I will put all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Ashton, for joining me. This has been
Yes, thank you.